How's it going, everyone? I'm excited for this panel. I'm excited to have a wonderful group of folks representing 4 different companies pushing the frontier in different ways. Hopefully everybody's next has been fun. Hopefully you've got to listen to lots of things, hopefully meet a bunch of cool people, maybe gamble a little bit. I don't know what people do in Vegas besides gamble and come to these talks. So hopefully it's been fun. And yeah, my name is Logan Kilpatrick. I lead the developer platform team in DeepMind, focused on building our APIs, bringing the models to you all so that you can build on top of Gemini and VO and the rest of our suite of models. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to have this conversation. And I will be asking tons of random questions really about how sort of 4 companies that are on the frontier are using our technology, using the sort of technology in general. And hopefully we'll get a bunch of super interesting information out of you all. And then would love to do some Q&A. So if folks have questions for our panelists, would love to hear what you all have questions about. Before I do that, let's do, I think we see everybody's names up on the screen actually, so maybe we'll skip intros and we'll dive in to questions. I feel like the thing that's top of mind, I think, for lots of folks right now is obviously all the things that are happening in agents and coding, and we have 2 coding products and we have 2 products that are sort of have agentic capabilities built on top of them. And so I'm curious how you're thinking about this problem space, and also how that's changed, from a product perspective, actually in the implementation details over the last 6 months, as everyone has sort of evolved their product to become so much more agentic. And Michele with Replit, maybe do you wanna start?
Yeah, we made that bet a year and a half ago that our product was exclusively an agent, and it turns out that it was the right bet to make.
Can you give context? Why was that the bet? Why was it so clear a year and a half ago that that's the direction you wanted to go?
I think it was mostly conviction and not clarity back in those days, because agents were not nearly as powerful as they are today. So the outcome you were seeing was exciting for someone who understands research and exponential, maybe not as exciting for people who actually need to ship with agents. But we knew that would have happened really fast, maybe a few months after the first launch we made. It was a fundamental choice for us because we target knowledge workers. We don't target software developers, so we don't want to put them in front of an IDE. An IDE is the wrong product surface for someone who's not technical. And since then, I think the product philosophy hasn't changed. What changes is how ambitious we get in terms of what the agent should build. So we started with relatively simple prototypes, and now we go to enterprise customers and they create internal tools used by thousands of employees on a daily basis. And those tools are scaling well. They have data governance and security requirements that make them happy. So the entire field is moving this fast, fundamentally because AI has become more powerful.
And even with that early bet, how much has it been a huge amount of effort and engineering energy to rebase a bunch of the stuff, or the infrastructure that you invested in a year and a half has actually been the infrastructure that's carried over, and you've just been able to I'm simplifying, but just add more tools to what the agent can do, and it's more robust now, for example.
So Replit is a 10 years overnight success, which means 8 years were invested on building infrastructure and the tools that developers use. And suddenly we were at the point where we could build an agent that turned to be sort of the connective tissue among all the tools that we had in the past. And we built it on top of it. So we had a massive advantage by having spent a lot of time building infrastructure. The agent roadmap moves at a crazy pace, and we throw away part of the software we architect it on a regular basis because frontier models make leaps every 3 months or so at this point. The infrastructure roadmap moves at a totally different timeline. There are certain things that need to move with a more sustainable pace because you need to keep security in mind, you need to take care of your user data, and it creates a very interesting tension within the company when you have these roadmaps that are not moving at the same pace, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, lots of tension in that direction. Jay, I'm curious actually on the multimodal side, how you all are thinking about this, as somebody who's the product, bring a bunch of media, sort of generate a bunch of assets from a bunch of input media. I'm curious, has this agentic era been sort of a rebase for you, or was it like literally this was, you know, what you were betting on originally, and it's just a different implementation detail of how you all are thinking about this?
Yeah, the agentic would bring much more capability of understanding what the user want, because before that, the only thing you can do is you wrap around the API, and then you let the user either you ingest their intention and then wrap a prompt around them and then prompt the model to give them certain multimedia assets. Nowadays with agent, you can understand their high-level goals. You can use agent to do research and build a full story and then create a video for them end to end. And you can also take feedback from them to do human-in-the-loop iterations so that it's much more exciting era where you can deliver so much more value to the users than reselling APIs in some sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And Bianca, I'm actually also curious for you all, like this agent era, how much has this changed? Like, I think you all have a super interesting product and strategy, and so I'm curious how much this has changed how you all are thinking about the product strategy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when we first started pitching this in 2020, like an agent that could, you know, be a personal stylist in your closet, a lot of investors were like, "This is never going to happen." So we've come a long way. I think for us, you know, we always thought that this time would come, which is a great thing that it actually panned out. And we prepared this strategy in 3 different ways, and I think it actually has really worked in our favor. The first was thinking about how do we build this huge data set in terms of what people are actually wearing, what brands they have in their wardrobes, what are their sizing and styling preferences, so that flywheel, it was intrinsic to all of the product-led growth around the digital wardrobe app. And that was really great in terms of building our moat, trying to then think about how we can build really niche specific models that can hit a lot of these different and new deliverables that the customers actually want, and they're getting more and more savvy in terms of what they want, you know, us as a company to do for them, whether it's packing for trips, planning, optimizing your wardrobe, giving insights to potentially, you know, verify new purchases. All of that stuff has kind of been brought into the thinking around the outputs. The second thing we've always been thinking about is basically different capabilities, like how can people try on clothes, right? So we've been thinking a lot about, you know, what is the data that we need to amass as a company to make virtual try-on really, really detailed and personalized. And that's been stuff like, you know, getting users to log pictures of what they're, like selfies of what they're wearing on a daily basis. So we've built out a huge understanding of the consumer's body in different clothes, in different moments. And that's really been able to help us fine-tune, I guess, the product outcomes that we're looking for. And then thirdly, you know, our big bet was always to say the B2C flywheel is one thing, and we're working on, you know, incredible organic growth there, going into new markets like the US, LATAM, but really the big vision was always B2B. How can we leverage this data set in order to personalize the e-commerce experience? And so I guess that's, you know, now something that's incredibly top of mind for retailers, and it comes at a really great time for us as we've kind of just closed a seed round. That's awesome.
Well, congrats. You know, I'm curious for you all at Factory building droids, which I love. I love the droids thing. Not agents, they're droids. Actually, I'm curious. Internally, are they agents or are they droids? Droids are like the...
No, we use the term droids because like we started 3 years ago when GPT 3.5 came out, and we said we want to build fully autonomous AI systems for enterprise businesses that work across the entire software development lifecycle, and that means that we have to build a layer of governance and management of these autonomous AI systems. And it just didn't work for like 2.5 years. And so like, I think that like in terms of like sort of seeing what was going to happen, we definitely had a lot of iteration time to basically imagine it, but it's very different to sort of imagine what that would look like. At a very high level, like I sometimes joke, you could literally just take our seed pitch deck and present it in a meeting today, and the people would just nod and be like, great, sounds great, let's get it deployed, because it just basically is the same vision, but the tactics of how we got there were so varied along the way. The world just changed many times. Model capabilities came out, how you actually integrated that in, it just kept changing and changing and changing. And so, you know, Droid really came out of the fact that the term agent didn't exist yet. I mean, it did, but only in like cognitive science literature. So we didn't think that that was going to be something that necessarily caught on. And so we said, they're droids.
You had a different name, and then Disney stopped you from using that name, right? Allegedly.
No. The name has always been Droid. I think that you're actually, ask me that question again in a year, and then you might get an answer. So far,
lawyers in the room, or
we are outside of merchandising, so I think it's probably fair game to keep it for now.
I love it. I'm curious, and actually for you all to plant this seed, I'm curious, like as the agents start running longer, I'm curious how this will impact all your products and businesses. But actually before that, I'm also curious, like as coding becomes this general purpose agent harness potentially, and like it's like code all the way down and code generated for all these use cases. I'm curious, like how has that evolved the way that you all have thought about like what the actual product strategy is? It's like less in some cases potentially about like building software. It's like could just be like the droid could just be a general purpose agent that any other company is using, even if they're not doing software development tasks. Is that something that you all are thinking about or excited about?
Yeah, totally. That's like the $1 million question. Honestly, that's the $1 billion question that I think is interesting, because like what we've seen is that Droid is so competent at effectively navigating the digital world, because underneath of everything we do on a computer is software. And I think that the innovations in self-recursive improvement on coding agent harnesses have pushed them to the point where if you do have an extremely competent, local-first, model-agnostic coding agent, you kind of have a extremely competent general agent for almost any work that can be done on a computer. And that's most work. And so we've thought a lot about that, and I think that right now we're laser focused on making sure that enterprise software organizations are able to, across their entire software business, do the things that they need to do. And sometimes that means product managers, data scientists, product marketers. Our third highest user internally of Droid is an account executive on our team selling Droid with data. And I think that means that there's a lot of opportunities, but we don't see it as us moving into other spaces. Instead, we see it as other spaces becoming software. And I think that that's sort of something that we've known for a long time, is that software is eating the world. And so a lot of what we do is say, let's work on software. And it just so happens that software is kind of, everything is computer, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that. We could talk about this thread for a long time. Jay, I planted the seed about sort of long-running agents. We were talking before we got on stage about sort of like the tension for you all of this like taste human element in your product experience, and how like it definitely still requires in certain cases like this human in the loop to make a judgment decision. And I'm curious, as like agents out of the box start going longer running operations, et cetera, like what, like is it still going to be taste that's the bottleneck for you all, or like where do you think the bottleneck is going to start to move in the product experience that you all are building as agents start running longer?
So first of all, we are really excited about the development of harness, because before that, you have to basically write your own agent React loop and deal with all these things in context engineering. Now there are better and better harness. It feels like the MVC framework during the web era. Before that, you have to write all these things by hand, and then you have Ruby on Rails and Django, and it's much easier to write reliable software and to serve the customers. So with that, you have to focus on the taste, because we serve the customers by helping them create good social media ready videos as agents. However, social media is a very competitive arena. And you cannot just make like a AI slop and hope to get a lot of viewership. You have to tell good stories. You have to give good visuals. And all these have to stand on top of what everybody else has been doing on social media, which means that the foundational model has their generic and homogeneous taste if you just use them without like a lot of thoughts into it. And one of our job is to inject a lot of the taste on top of in our product on top of foundational multimodal generators, and it's very important to measure the quality of the output of your product. So when you are iterating these skills and iterating templates, you have to make sure that any iteration brings your product better, not worse. And without a good eval mechanism, it's a lot of guesswork. And once you ship something, you don't know whether some people will get worse result and maybe some people will get better. And it has always been a challenge in this, because it's easier to detect defects in videos, but it's hard to measure taste. And you have to combine human and a lot of rubrics engineering to measure these, to measure the quality of the output. And they can be expensive and inaccurate. So these are the challenges still being being there during agentic era for video gen agents.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. We were also talking before we got on stage sort of about this like speed, accuracy, tension that exists. And I'm curious for the other three panelists, like on this same through line as agents start running longer and longer and longer and doing more, it's obviously going to take longer to make that happen, like unless all of a sudden we have magic chips that make everything super fast. And the tension is like, what does the user do while this thing is out running and doing a bunch of work on your behalf? And I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on sort of like the product experience innovation, or the way that you're like breaking apart problems to make it so that like even if the model is capable of going and doing 24 hours of work, like the user wants to see something and know that there's things happening, and all like that, the tension between the long running tasks and like the immediacy of everyone. And I'll share my personal experiences. Like we've seen this across our products, which is like the faster you give users an answer, it's like the whole original Google search thesis. If you can do something in 100 milliseconds, like people are happy and they stick in the product and they're, they love it. If you make them wait 10 seconds, they drop off and they go do something else. And I feel like as we move to even longer, there's a lot of tension in there. And I'm curious how y'all are thinking about this.
We disrupted our entire product experience when we launched Agent 3 back in September 2025. We were marketing the fact that our agent was running for 200 minutes in a row autonomously. I think we were the first company to just start to talk about the fact that it could run for hours. And it turns out that we probably didn't put enough emphasis on the fact that in reality, users will start to not pay attention to the product anymore for that reason. So I think autonomy shouldn't be fetish for agent builders at this point. Yes, it's important that you take a user from point A to point B without having them to worry about any of the technical details. But at the same time, the product experience has to be such that you remain engaged. And I think if purely you focus on making the agent more autonomous and there is nothing else to do on your product surface, you're gonna lose them, in the process. What we did with the latest launch, back in March this year, is we allow you to do a lot of planning in parallel, where several agents are running. Basically, we have a swarm that is completely managed by us, and our users don't even understand that that's happening, most likely. So there is a way to make things go faster by means of parallelization, and there is a way to keep users engaged by just giving them more reasons to work on your product, which could be planning. In our case, there's also a lot of designing happening, a lot of other things that are about the software development lifecycle. And I believe every product out there, even if they're not coding agents, they should start to think in these terms, where yes, you will have agents running in parallel, they're going to be running autonomously, but you need to make sure that the user is engaged in some other ways. Otherwise, exactly what you were mentioning, they're going to drop.
The drop is savage.
Yeah.
So I think, from our perspective, we're thinking about re-engineering the user experience in the app in 3 different ways as they wait for the feedback that they're expecting. The first is thinking about education. The second is social for us. And the third is very obvious, but gamification. And so in terms of the education piece, everything that we're trying to build now as you wait for a response to a query or you're expecting an output from the app, is asking you to either give it more information or data in a really fun, gamified way, or is educating the end user on why this is important, what else you can do with the app in the meantime, thinking a lot about sharing our mission, our vision, which is centered around sustainability. And so we found really fun and engaging ways of doing that and hitting product education while the user waits. And then when we think about social, again, for us, we're a social wardrobe app, so you can go into your friends' wardrobes, style them. You can post style challenges with like, I don't know how to wear this suit. Guys, help, I got a big, talk tomorrow on stage. And so we think about leveraging those challenges as the user waits in order to kind of gamify that experience and get them doing fun, reinforcing things that continue to feed that data pipeline. And then in terms of the gamification segment, again, we've sort of re-engineered the whole thing to take a playbook, a trick out of Duolingo's playbook to think about, how can we get the user to complete really fun, engaging challenges that feel native and core to the experience, so that they don't even remember that they're waiting, but they actually get brought into something else. And we're A/B testing right now what are the best things that actually drive long-term engagement and retention. And so we find that we can sort of have these two things existing in parallel, and then they're really excited to get the final output when it's ready. And it's almost secondary because they've kind of hit these three things in the interim.
I love that. Yeah,
First of all, that's great. I think the education on
work in progress. Work in progress.
No, but like that's like the education on the wait times is like a fantastic idea. I think that we sort of think of there being like this spectrum of autonomy where a lot of people are using synchronous coding agents almost like in their daily workflow. They open up a terminal or an IDE. They say, hey, could you please do this thing? And the expectation is maybe some degree of like couple minutes, and they're managing, or even if they sort of flip to another screen, they're still fundamentally there. And then you have this world of like sort of fully asynchronous, like pull request, on-demand, trigger-based automations that don't even need a human in the loop for the initial component, but may then need some sort of like engagement thereafter. But on the very like far end of the spectrum, like we have a product called Missions, which is effectively completely breaks the synchronous paradigm by enabling a user to define a scope of work that can be quite substantial. Like the longest mission ran for 14 days straight of continuous work, used almost 150 billion cash tokens, and ultimately like that workflow is more reminiscent of working with like a consulting firm almost, where you say, hey, look, I'm going to spend all of my synchronous time up front for maybe even like 2 or 3 hours figuring out precisely what I want the scope of work to be done. And I almost expect a cost estimate of what that's going to look like. And then I send off this work to be executed, and I know that I'm going to be not present. And this was a almost 50 million line code base where there was a migration that was going actively across that entire code base from a legacy language to a more contemporary one. And I think that scale of work we expect to be very powerful and different. And I think that a lot of companies are going to start building out these sorts of strategies around, well, if it's going to be 10 days, then we just need to completely rethink the interaction pattern entirely.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think there's been lots of conversations in the last like 2 years about actually like to the point of this like consulting model and how like the pricing will change. Like, do you really want to be charging for tokens in that context? Is it like an outcome-based pricing, et cetera? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I have another question, which is I'm curious, like, as we sit here. Last year, there was lots of problems as far as putting AI and agents into production. A lot of those things hopefully have gotten easier for you all and for other folks who are building stuff. I'm curious where the bottlenecks are today across all 4 of your different products, and sort of how you're thinking about like, are these bottlenecks problems that you all are taking on? Is it things that you're like, the ecosystem is going to solve this and you'll benefit from those things? Do you need the model companies to solve them? I'm curious, what are the sort of top of mind bottlenecks? I don't know if anyone has anything top of mind, or maybe life is good and there's no bottlenecks.
I can
Plenty of problems.
Yes.
I can break the ice. I think the biggest bottleneck is verification. And the idea that agents at this point are autonomous enough to create PRs, to work 4 days in a row. But fundamentally, if we knew how to verify the outcome of what an agent has done, outside of the realm of coding, by the way, because if you work in an enterprise code base and it's very thoroughly tested and your agent is just extending the test suite, you probably get some level of certainty that your code is functioning correctly. But we don't know how it works in the real world, and especially for code bases that are not as mature as Google, then it's hard to rely exclusively on tests. It's hard to rely exclusively on CI/CD. So if we had proper verification techniques, both with and without coding in the picture, it will really help us to, first of all, trust agents running autonomously for long, and at the same time also change our pricing model. To your point, we don't want to charge per tokens anymore. It's hard to explain. It's a variable cost. It would be much better to charge by outcome. But how can you verify if the outcome has been accomplished or not? If the user is the judge of the outcome, then of course, in terms of as a game theoretical framework, they would say, no, you didn't do what I wanted, and I want a refund. So I think it's a big AI problem. I know most of the labs are working on that. It's hard to see exactly what's going to be the shape of a proper verifier. I'm not talking about LLM as a judge. That's a technique that has been around for a while. Of course, it helps us to make agents more powerful. I'm really talking about a oracle at the end of the work that the agent has done that gives it a thumb up or thumb down. So if you're working on the holy grail, please let us know.
Sounds like you want AGI, is what it sounds like.
We all want AGI on this stage, you know? Yeah.
You'll get it. You'll get it. Yeah, I'm curious. Other bottlenecks. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think for us, being kind of predominantly D2C or B2C, sorry, there are two things that are weirdly really difficult to kind of fix in a world where everything is fixable. For us, the first is, I guess, competition generally, right? Like when we started this, it was all about building the data set. It was all about trying to train your own models to do some form of styling or some form of personalization. And today, obviously, a lot of this stuff is kind of open to all. And so keeping up with the pace of competition in a like B2C world at cost, when you're looking at, who is raising more money and therefore has more, to do a proper go-to-market, to think a lot more about, acquisition of potentially a shared target market. So that's been really interesting in terms of thinking about how we can ship at scale really, really fast with precision. And I think that's the key point, right? Because this is a whole new world where if you're thinking about your brand awareness, your brand presence and recognition, ultimately your outputs have to be really good. And so that's been really interesting to sort of adapt to think about how do we build faster and ship faster with all of the new models coming out and all of the immense capabilities that we've been waiting literally years for. And then the second thing, which is interesting, is thinking about design resource. So we have a lot of feedback. A community of kind of 10 million users. We get like literally iterations or like suggestions coming through on a daily basis. We can scrape, forums like Reddit, do a lot of social listening. We kind of know where the product capabilities need to go and evolve to. And we can build and ship things so much faster. But who's designing this stuff when you're thinking about a really, really strong brand that can kind of demarcate in this sea of new competitors? So that's been something that, we're trying to wrap our head around in terms of staffing and hiring.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I would point to the most would be, so there's this concept of like the model overhang or capability overhang, where the models are just much further ahead than the products that are able to take advantage of the full capabilities of the model. I actually think that that's still true, but it's much less true today. I think that we're clearly hitting some limits that are like related to coherence over very long periods of time around the quality and performance, about self-validation. And I think that what that means is that our harnesses are actually, like the frontier harnesses that Agent Labs are putting out are just starting to get quite good. And now I think what we're seeing is a mindset overhang or like an enablement overhang, where there are organizations in the Fortune 500 that have just fundamentally different software development organizations as a result of the deployment of these systems. And it's not really geographically split. Like in my head, I'm thinking about some of our customers in Poland, in Japan, in LATAM. Like there are organizations that are traditionally, you would probably say, quite slow on tech, that are almost fully autonomously shipping almost every single one of their PRs. And then there are organizations that are digital natives today that are still debating, like, should we use this tool or should we use that tool? And so to me, this seems like it's actually a mindset thing. There are organizations that just haven't fully grokked how different the world is today, not how it will be in 6 months or how everything's going to change soon. Like the world changed probably 5 months ago. And now if you're like basically not adopting this at full speed, responsibly, then it's going to lead to, I think, a sort of, oh no moment in a couple months where you're like, wait, when did this happen? When did everybody adopt these tools? And so I think that mindset is incredibly important for a CIO, CTO leadership team to have. And we do need to go full steam. The tools probably matter at least to the extent that you have a frontier harness, but beyond that, all of the alpha is going to be how you choose to communicate to your team how to use the tool, not whether it's like tool A or tool B.
Yeah, for us, I think the cost is still a blocker. It has been quite high. And so far, these best AI gen models on videos are ranging from 10 cents to 50 cents per second, which means that mostly the professionals can afford it. So you can see that C-Dance 2 has been pretty famous, and people are using it, and they are used for mission critical work at the moment. So if we want to have more, as we tap early adopters as well as the earlier majorities, which is about democratized video agent, you want make it more affordable for average person to be able to use it. And when you are building an agent, you inevitably have to do retries, you do critique in the loop, and then you do polishment, so that every minute of video you deliver to the customer, you probably need to spend 3 minutes of worth of assets spent on vendors, and that makes your cost of goods sold incredibly high. And even at like good quality, people may not feel it's worth it. They are not spending too much attention on your product. They get an okay video or a satisfying video, but then when they see the bill, that is like $30 per video, $60 per video for their social media, they have a question mark on whether they should continue to buy it or not. So cost has been still a challenge.
Jay, I promise we're going to make better models, and we'll make them cheaper over time for you to hopefully help solve this problem.
Us too, please.
Yeah, of course. I've got one more question, or I've got many questions, but I'll do one more, and then I would love to hear questions from the audience. I think it's been as sort of, a thread of this conversation has just been like agents doing more stuff, and I think obviously agents are starting to like not just understand text and sort of process text, but also like see things in this whole like multimodal space that we're in. Obviously for some products with sort of styling and video understanding for you all, Jay, as well. I'm curious like how you all are thinking about this like multimodal world and how much it's a part of the way that you're thinking about it, and actually how much it's changed. Because for some, at least for the Gemini story, we've been multimodal to begin with. It's been something that's been a focus. But I'm curious if there's been like a chasm that's been crossed for any of those capabilities, generation or understanding, and whether or not it's making an impact in any of the products. Whoever wants it.
Well, I'm really looking forward for video understanding capability inside the agent. Right now, most of the agent can do image understanding, but that is so much it. It's like helping customers clip a video or making a video, but you are looking at the film frame by frame. You are not looking at an LE editor on the screen playing frames continuously. So that makes the video editing capability on the agent much less than ideal. So I'm kind of like looking forward to see more video native capability from an agent perspective.
We've got something good coming. I'll email you, Jay. Some agentic video stuff that we're cooking on. So it's exciting. Other folks, yeah.
Yeah, I think multimodal definitely matters. I think a lot about some of the work that we've started to do, where I think that users sort of almost expect that you can manipulate images, edit videos, work the remotion, and I think there's something like some skills that are coming out that are oriented around coding agents, manipulating and creating on that string of coding agents being general agents, like video content, image content, and a lot of the world sort of operates we sort of shifted to like mermaid diagrams in Markdown, but I think that if we actually had richer ways to visualize complex systems, we would do a lot of us, like you kind of don't need to read individual lines of code to the degree that you used to. Like I would say probably ever, but like that's not true for everybody yet. And I think that if you stay at that higher level of abstraction, visuals are sort of one of the ways that we can build an understanding of even more substantially complex systems. And so definitely feels like it's important for our work.